Kathy, Liz Truss is under some pressure tonight over those leaked comments from 2019. The Guardian newspaper alleging that she said that British workers needed more graft, among other things. A campaign source responding that the comments were almost half a decade old and lacked context. But they're unlikely to endear her to this crowd. Protesters welcomed both of the candidates to the hustings here in Perth. It's a reminder that Scotland is tough territory for Tory leaders. And on the independence question, well, there is not an awful lot more to say. It's pretty much a continuity position from both candidates. And a reminder that there is flash photography in my report from the beginning.
I hope this is going to work. We'll soon find out.
Liz Truss, front runner, is banking on a familiar formula as she landed in Scotland earlier with a firm no to an independence referendum that might have been uttered by Boris Johnson himself.
We had a referendum in 2014. It was clear it was a one-in-a-generation referendum, and the Scottish people voted for the Union, for the United Kingdom.
Well, I wish you every success. It's so rude when people are talking.
As Rishi Sunak discovered on a previous trip, there's no escaping the issue in Scotland. For him, the language is different, but the position on a vote the Scottish government wants to hold next year is more of the same.
Talking about independence referendums when people are struggling with their energy bills, it's the wrong priority, and it's not what I want to focus on. I want to get people the help they need this winter.
Both candidates have singled out Scotland's First Minister in this campaign. Rishi Sunak says she's an existential threat to the Union.
I was at Wembley last night.
Liz Truss, not publicity shy herself, suggesting Nicola Sturgeon has a tendency to seek the limelight.
I think the best thing to do with Nicola Sturgeon is ignore her. I'm sorry, she's an attention seeker.
In Perth today, a sign this more muscular approach did not go unnoticed. Each candidate wants to highlight what they deem to be SNP failings in government.
We believe that independence is the best future for the people of Scotland, but let's engage in a proper debate. Let's not have any of this nonsense about saying that they're going to disrespect the people of Scotland, they're going to disrespect the First Minister. It's about time that we actually treated each other and everybody else as adults.
Beyond tonight's hustings, there's a way bigger challenge for whoever wins this contest. And that is to succeed where, by most Scottish Tories' admissions, Boris Johnson failed, and to find a message that truly resonates in Scotland. And that will require savviness, nuance, understanding that what may ignite the Tory base in England may inflame voters here. It probably requires a once-in-a-generation kind of politician.
I think domestically it's probably taken up.
Noah is a Conservative councillor in Perthshire who now thinks Liz Truss has something special, having supported Rishi Sunak at first.
You may have switched sides from Sunak to Truss. There are people who say, but it doesn't matter who you support because the Tories keep losing in Scotland and that's not going to change.
No, I don't agree that that's the case. I think you saw, especially from Ruth Davidson, that leaders in Scotland can break those kind of barriers that have been put around certain groups, and it's that closed-mindedness in terms of electoral strategy that's been the death of Labour up here, and I think in the future probably will be the death of the SNP because they start taking people for granted.
In the short term, there's only one issue in town: how to avert economic catastrophe for many households and businesses. It's come too late for some.
The rising costs of doing business and the cost of living crisis kind of put paid to it. So normally we would have music playing, we would have customers in.
Tricia closed her coffee shop in Perth around 2 weeks ago. She's voted SNP and Tory in the past.
I think both candidates need to wake up and smell the coffee, if I'm being honest. They've got fanciful plans, and at the moment it's a lot of hot air, but whoever walks into that door in number 10 in a month's time has to have a plan, and they need to hit the ground running because businesses need help now.
You have to be better.
It's only going to get tougher by the time the new PM takes office. The two candidates may agree on independence, not so the economy, and get it wrong, other arguments become so much harder to win.
Well, earlier I spoke to representatives of both campaigns. The Scottish Conservative MP Andrew Bowie is supporting Rishi Sunak and MSP Murdo Fraser is backing Liz Truss. I began by asking Mr Fraser if she was right to claim she was Minister for the Union when she advocated ignoring Scotland's First Minister.
Well, I think Liz Truss is quite right to say Nicola Sturgeon should be ignored when she's demanding another independence referendum, when we know that the great majority of people in Scotland don't want another one on the timescale Nicola Sturgeon is proposing. But of course, as Prime Minister, Liz Truss would have to engage with the First Minister of Scotland and the other devolved administrations.
So you'd urge her to meet the First Minister as soon as possible if and when she becomes Prime Minister?
Well, I'm sure she will meet the leaders of all the devolved administrations. But when she meets Nicola Sturgeon, that needs to be about how both Scotland's governments can work together and send a very firm message to Nicola Sturgeon that there will not be another independence referendum anytime soon.
The Scottish Government has said they will hold another independence referendum next October. I know that's not legally binding, but if it shows a majority for independence, you'd have no choice but to respect that, wouldn't you?
Well, it's up to the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom to decide whether or not a referendum can be held, and if so, on what terms. I think the great weight of legal opinion is that a legally relevant referendum cannot be held, and a referendum would be a huge distraction from all the other important matters that should be the focus of the Scottish Government, such as rebuilding our economy post-COVID, sorting out the problems in the NHS, and driving up education standards, sorting out infrastructure, dealing with our drugs deaths crisis.
Was Boris Johnson good for the Union, yes or no?
I think I would have preferred another occupant, which is why I didn't vote for him in the leadership election at that time.
Right. So Liz Truss is a continuity candidate, isn't she? She's backed Boris Johnson. She's still in the government as Foreign Secretary.
Well, I think it's quite interesting if you look at the studies of opinion that have been done most recently by Lord Ashcroft. Amongst most people, they would regard Rishi Sunak as more of a continuity candidate than Liz Truss. Liz Truss, I think, for many people, is a blank canvas. I think she's talking about a different direction in terms of economic policy compared to what we've had up until now.
So when Liz Truss described, she was pretty dismissive about what she called as handouts to people during this cost of living crisis. Do you think she should rephrase that?
Well, I think what she was saying was it doesn't make sense for the government, on one hand, to be taking money away from people in taxation and then giving it back to them with the other hand. What she's been talking about is reducing the burden of taxation overall, which should help everyone, but also targeted support to those most in need and those suffering the most from rising energy costs. And I think that balance between these two approaches strikes absolutely the right chord, and I think people will see that as a sensible way to proceed.
Murdo Fraser, thanks very much. Thank
you.
How is Rishi Sunak going to stop Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP in their tracks, as he said he will?
Well, we're going to stop them by beating them at the ballot box and winning the argument. You know, I wouldn't be standing here if I believed the polls. If I believed the polls, the Scottish Conservatives would have no MPs in Scotland whatsoever. I'm determined to prove them wrong, to increase our representation north of the border, and I believe that to do that, Rishi Sunak's got the answers. Because the issues that are facing the Scottish people are exactly the same that are facing the English people, the Welsh people, and people in Northern Ireland. They're the issues with the cost of living, they're the hike in inflation, and that's what we need to get on top of, and that's what Rishi's going to do. He's got a plan to do that, so that we can then grow the economy and be in a place to cut taxes. Rishi Sunak cares just as passionately about people in Scotland as he does in the rest of the United Kingdom, and that's how we're going to beat the SNP, by making about the issues and by holding them to account in the areas where they're drastically failing.
You talk about working with the Scottish Government. Liz Truss has talked about ignoring the First Minister. You know, she's an attention seeker, she said. What are the consequences for the Union, do you think, if Liz Truss does become Prime Minister?
Well, look, I would disagree with Liz Truss in part. I think Nicola Sturgeon is an attention seeker. One only has to go by her comments and her appearances in Vogue to see that for what it is. But the fact is we can't beat the SNP by ignoring them. We've got to work with them, yes, in areas where we want to do well, i.e. investing in education, investing in the health service, making sure Scotland is a great place to come and live and work and invest.
You've said you shouldn't ignore Scotland's First Minister. Does it also apply then that you can't ignore, if there is a vote, it might not be legally binding, but if there is a vote, as the SNP promises, and that vote says the Scottish people want to leave the UK, you can't ignore that either, can you?
look, I just don't think now's the time to be talking about it. We've got so many issues to face as a country, and indeed as a continent, and indeed the entire Western world. The cost of living crisis, the spike in inflation, Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
But if the SNP is determined to talk about it, they
it's
put that to the people, and the Scottish people speak and say that they want to leave the UK, even if that isn't legally binding. You can't ignore that, can you?
Sowing division and uncertainty right now would be grossly irresponsible and a gross dereliction of duty, frankly, if the Scottish National Party government were to head down that track.
Well, congratulations for standing up and defending him, because a lot of his cabinet backers, well, a fair few, are defecting, including the former Welsh Secretary. Has his campaign got the smell of death about it?
I hope not. I hope by standing here in front of you I look alive and well. I certainly feel alive and well, and Rishi's campaign is alive and well. There's no stench of death about the Rishi campaign. We're in this to win it. I've just been with him most of the day here today, and what I hear from party members the length and breadth of this country is that when he engages with them, when he speaks to them one-on-one or in hustings setting, as we are going to have here tonight in Perth, he wins people over far more than Elizabeth Truss does.
Andrew Barry, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.